Good afternoon, everyone. YouTubers, thank you guys so much for joining in to Mr. Hughes' class. I really appreciate you guys joining in for a little bit of an overview of my adventure in Chile on board the Darwin 200 expedition. I'm joining live in Corner Brook, Newfoundland. So I used to live in Toronto, a lot closer to you guys, but now I'm on the west coast of one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. I really encourage you to check it out if you get a chance. And you guys might already have my story map associated with this whole voyage. If you don't, I'll make sure you have it at the end. A little bit of an overview of some of the things I got the chance to do and a little bit of backdrop. Now, this is special today, too, because just earlier today, a few hours ago, I was live with Joe on the Darwin 200 on the Oosterschelde, heading up the coast to Ecuador. I did leg 13 from Chile to Peru. We'll get into that in a minute. And now he's heading up to Ecuador. So we had a really special broadcast live from the deck of the ship, him showcasing all the amazing adventures he had in Manu National Park in Peru. We brought on Callie Broaddus, one of our favorite conservationists. So she got to talk about her amazing work in Ecuador. I really encourage you to check it out. Like everything we do, it is on our YouTube channel. But for the purposes of today and to dive in with you guys directly, I wanted to bring up the slide deck, highlight some of the adventures that I had the chance to have, and I'm so excited for all your questions at the end. So here I am on board the Darwin 200 expedition. This is literally the first full day on the ship. We'll dive into getting on the ship in just a minute, but basically I'm on the deck. And the gentleman in blue on the right of this picture up in the mast, his name is Matu, and Matu is the mate. He said, "Hey, who wants to go up the mast?" And I actually threw up my arm so quickly to say yes that I hurt my shoulder. I've never put my arm up that fast in my entire life. So because I was really fast, they let me go up in the harbor to help bring up the sail, tie it up. It's one of the coolest things I've ever had the chance to do. And I think it's a good little primer as we dive in with the rest of the presentation. So first and foremost, for those of you who might be new to this, what is Darwin 200? What on earth is going on here? Well, Darwin 200 is this really exciting global voyage taking place over 2 years, following in the footsteps, the ship steps of Charles Darwin's voyage of the Beagle back in 1831. So over this 2-year voyage, they're going to be stopping at 32 ports all around the world, 4 different continents, providing young conservationists, young people like you, not much older than you guys actually in our class today, the chance to do amazing projects to feature conservation stories of wildlife at risk and the things that we're doing to help them all around the globe. I'm going to feature some of the conservationists in just a minute in an upcoming slide, but that is the basis. We're going on this global voyage. We're showcasing some really cool places. We're following in the footsteps of the Beagle, and we're giving those conservationists the opportunity of a lifetime to kickstart their careers. So as a bit of a first and foremost, Charles, let me go back. Sorry, I'm too excited. I'm going ahead too many slides. Charles Darwin. Now, some of you might be familiar with Charles Darwin. Some of you might never have heard of him. Hopefully you have. He is my scientific hero. I'm an evolutionary biologist by background. So I know that many of you will know me as like host man now, getting to bring on cool scientists and explorers around the world. But my backdrop is as an evolutionary biologist, and it's because of the work of Charles. Now, you guys probably in your class have a student or a few students who are like super, super, super smart. They know everything. They get every right answer. You can look at them right now if you want to. No, don't put them on the spot. Charles Darwin was not that kid. Charles Darwin did terribly in school. His dad wanted him to be a doctor. He hated medicine. He fainted at the sight of blood. He gave up school. But what he really loved to do was collect facts. He loved being in nature. He loved trying to understand wildlife. And so this backdrop and his interest in the natural world led him get on this amazing voyage of the Beagle in 1831. So at that time, ships were going all around the world. All the European nations were sending ships globally. And what would happen is, as the ships were out there to do some mission, in this case, the Beagle was set to chart the coast of South America, build a better map, basically. And so on those voyages, when they could, they would bring on scientists of a variety of kinds to do natural history observations, to do astronomical observations, and more. And Charles, at 22 years old, was chosen as the sort of gentleman companion of the captain. Now, 22 might seem pretty old for you guys. 22 is super young. You're basically a baby when you're 22. You have done nothing in science at that point. So it's this really remarkable opportunity for a really young man to go on what was planned to be a 3-year voyage and ended up being 5 years. That is a really, really long time to be on a voyage. By the end, Charles, in his letters, was dying to get home. He's basically like counting the hours in his last year and a half on the ship to get back to England, and he never went anywhere again. Like 5 years was more than enough for him. But while he was on this voyage, he came up with the backdrop of what would turn into natural selection on the origin of species, which as an idea is really quite remarkable. I mean, at its base, it's that all things change over time, all wildlife changes over time, and all wildlife is related. You may not feel closely related to a fish or to a tree or to a fungus, but you are. Life arose on this planet once and is diversified from there. So you actually share a relative. You are literally, quite literally related to every other living thing on Earth. And Charles Darwin figured that out as one of the most amazing scientific accomplishments of all time. And again, done by someone who just worked really hard at it and followed the facts where they led. So I love the chance as an evolutionary biologist to get to go on this voyage, retracing the voyage of the Beagle. And where are we going? If you've been following along with our world's most exciting classroom programs every week, you have been with us for a while now. We set sail in 2023. We're going to be at sail till 2025. They left England not too long ago, passed across the Atlantic Ocean to Brazil, sort of hopped along the coast there. You can see in the bottom of this picture, Rio de Janeiro, Puerto Santa Cruz, Stanley, and the Falkland Islands. And then what we've had the chance to do is wrap around the bottom of South America and come up. And so my leg, which we'll showcase in a minute, was Valparaiso to Callao, Peru. So leg 13 up that big swath of the western side of South America. Joe's on the leg up to Ecuador. And as you can see, over the next year and a bit, they're going to be crossing the entire Pacific Ocean, seeing some of those iconic islands like Fiji, Tahiti, Tonga, going down to Australia and New Zealand, coming all the way back across the Pacific Ocean, all the way to South Africa, and then back up to England, arriving in July of 2025. Now, as I noted too, this voyage has been featuring amazing conservationists. So on the Darwin 200 website, darwin200.com, you can check out all the Darwin leaders. These are young people, again, not much older than you, that have had the chance to join the ship on every leg and do these incredible conservation projects. Whether it's studying howler monkeys being re-released into the forest near Rio de Janeiro, seeing how dogs impact animals that are out in the wild, seeing the restoration of marshes and how many animals come back. They've been doing some really, really cool projects. There's many more Darwin leaders to come. The goal is to have one Darwin leader from every country in the world over the course of the expedition, and we are well on our way. So it's been a really, really exciting voyage for them. And if you have your own conservation stories or things that you'd like to do in your lives, maybe you'll draw some inspiration from these 6 folks or many of the other Darwin leaders. So, of course, to begin every expedition, you need to get there. As I said, I'm in the western side of Newfoundland in Corner Brook. And as you can see from this gigantic arrow, it is a lot of the world you need to cover to get down to Chile. I'd never been to Chile before. I was really excited to go to Chile. It is one of the longest countries in the world. So from north to south, it is comparable to Canada, the United States, China, Russia, like these huge, much bigger countries. It's just a really thin band on the western side of South America. And it has wildly varying habitats. It has the Andes, so one of the biggest mountain ranges in the world. It has the Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth outside of Antarctica, which is actually the driest desert in the world, which is super weird and super cool. And at the very bottom of Chile are the fjords. So just before my leg, the ship got the chance to pass through these epic, incredible water bodies with like 1,000-foot cliffs on either side of it, and blue whales and giant sea lions and amazing birds and glaciers. It was one of the coolest places on Earth. So look up Chile when you're done this program. It's a really special country. It's a really diverse country. And it was so cool to get to go there. Well, how did I get there? Well, of course, like most people traveling these days, took a modern airplane, which we all sort of think of as blasé now. It's like, oh yes, you get on a plane. But most people on this planet will never get on a plane. So it's still pretty miraculous that we had the chance to fly. And they are so fast. It is ridiculous to be able to go from Newfoundland to Chile in 13 and a half hours. In Charles Darwin's day, and in fact, even 100 years ago, the fastest and the only way to get there would have been by a sail ship, just like the Oosterschelde. And at top speed, with the wind in your favor, that journey takes weeks. So it's a testament to sort of the power of progress of science and technology that allows us to travel the world within a day. If I wanted to right now, I could be in Australia in a day. And that is ridiculous. That journey would have taken many weeks, if not months, back in the day. And it's something that I think we should all take a little bit more time to appreciate. Now, when I got there, before I got on the ship, I got the chance to spend a few days in Valparaiso. Valparaiso is one of the coolest cities ever. It is every possible surface that can be covered in art is covered in art. As you can see from the stairwell, the walls, there are murals everywhere on every side of every building, and the buildings themselves are painted beautifully. When you're walking down the street, you're passing people on saxophones and pianos, guitars. There's live music on every corner. It's one of the coolest, hippest places I've ever had the chance to visit. Also had some spectacular food and a big view of the harbor where I could actually see the Oosterschelde before I got on it. So a really, really special city. I hope everyone gets the chance to visit a place like Valparaiso in their life, because it's really, really special. Now, of course, the Oosterschelde, the ship itself. She is such a beautiful ship. If you'd told me at your age in grade 7, 8 that I would get to go on a big wooden tall ship up the coast of Chile one day, I would have laughed you out of the room. No one gets to do things like this. It's crazy to have had the chance to go on the Darwin 200 expedition. I did the math, and by the time Darwin 200 is wrapped up, about 700 people will have been on the voyage, which is about how many people have been to space. So I consider myself absurdly lucky to have had the chance to go on this beautiful ship. And she's huge. She's 50 meters, or about 150 feet from the tip of the bow to the end of the stern. Her tallest mast is 36 meters above the water, so about 113 feet. She's about 22 feet or 7 meters across. She's a really, really big ship. She can have 24 guests alongside 7 crew. When I was there, we had 21 guests, so 28 of us total on board the ship. And you get to be involved in every aspect of helping the ship sail when you're on board. I'll show some pictures of that in just a minute. Now, what's the route we took? Now, I assumed that when I got to Valparaiso, right near the bottom there, right near Santiago on the map, that we'd be following up really close to that coast the whole way. We'd be seeing the desert every single day, because that's the Atacama Desert. We didn't do that at all. We did a beeline. We basically did this exact straight line up to Lima, which meant that after about one day on the water, we were out of sight of land. So for a full week, we didn't see any land at all. We were 200 to 300 miles off the coast of South America. The Pacific Ocean is ridiculously large. It's bigger than all the land in the world combined. So every continent could easily fit inside the Pacific Ocean. So it's like 6,000 miles across the ocean to the other side. And the water we were in was super deep. It was like 4.5 kilometers straight down. Our captain joked that that was the closest land if we got in any trouble. But needless to say, we didn't want that to be our situation. And needless to say, too, we didn't have that situation. So all of that to say, a really cool opportunity to basically go straight into international waters and sail out of sight of land for over a week. Now, what is life on board like? Well, as I said, it's a little bit of everything. You get to be involved in every aspect of sailing, including steering the ship. I didn't know I was going to get the chance to steer the ship. You steer the ship every day, all day long. There is constantly a watch. So all the people on board have to have these shifts, basically, just like a worker, where you're at the helm, you're keeping watch, you're steering the ship. And it's got this big, beautiful wooden wheel, like out of something, again, from 150 years ago. So it was really cool to get the chance to steer. And the picture beside it's kind of weird. And that is a night view of the ship. So the watches include the night. There's a watch from 8 p.m. to midnight, one from midnight to 4 in the morning, and one from 4 in the morning to 8 a.m. So I had to get up at like 3:30 and like smack my face a little and splash my face with some water, have a quick coffee, and head out to the deck in the middle of pitch blackness on the ocean. And you can barely see the waves. You can barely see the edge of the ship. But what you see is this glowing compass right in front of the wheel. And your job for those 4 hours is to keep the ship at the same heading. You don't want to go off track. You want to stay going at due north, say, for the entire night. So if it starts going left, you steer to the right. Starts going right, you steer to the left. But it's really surreal being with that compass in the middle of the night. It sort of feels like being at the helm of a spaceship. So it was really, really cool. One of the most memorable experiences in my life. And we got to go up the mast, as I said. So 3 times I got the chance to go up the mast at the highest, about 90 feet above the surface of the deck. And when you're up there, it looks like the ocean is endless. It's like you and the ship, and there's nothing else on planet Earth. It's such a cool experience. And one of the questions we get a lot is, was it scary? And it's really not scary. I'm kind of afraid of heights. If I go near a big cliff, I stay like 10 feet back. I don't want to be near the edge. A lot of people do, not me. So I thought climbing might be a little sketchy, but honestly, it feels like a really big ladder. It feels very secure. And you have these big hooks on a harness that I'm wearing there. And every few steps, you click the hook in. So even if your hand slipped, you would be stuck to the ladder. You're not going to fall anywhere. It felt very, very safe. We also got to do things like swab the decks. So literally, as seawater and the sun affect the deck, they need to clean it. We get some soap. We scrub a dub-dub. It was fantastic. I love swabbing the deck. I rode around the broomstick like a Quidditch, like a broomstick for a while, like Harry Potter, which was very fun for me and tremendously dorky. One of our big questions we've been getting the entire time is what we ate on the ship. We did not eat like Charles Darwin ate. It was not hardtack and biscuits the whole time. And in part, that's because we weren't at sea for 5 years. We were at sea for 11 days. So every port they stop in, they stock up on some really, really good food. It was like eating in a nice restaurant every day, whether it's sausages or squid cakes in the top, these veggie piles. We had amazing stews. We had a chicken pot pie that was amazing. The bottom right is this glorious fish that we caught while we were at sea and put on these little toast. It was just such good eating. I can hardly stand it. I miss eating on board the ship. Joe's very lucky to be having that chance right now. Well, what are some of the things that we got to do? So cool experiences galore. Honestly, I've had the privilege of getting the chance to travel a lot of places in my life, and several of the most memorable experiences I've ever had were on board the ship. One night I came out, and as I said, it's usually pitch black. Well, one night they flicked on the lights so we could see the sails in the dark, which looks insane. Like all you see are these big bits of canvas that are glowing amidst this, again, endless blackness around you. It was really surreal. We just sat there for like half an hour and just looked at the sails. It was super, super cool. Going up the mast was super fun. I love the chance to do that. I'd recommend it to everyone. We slowly but surely persuaded pretty much everyone who was afraid on the ship to go up the mast. It's sort of a testament to the fact that you should push past some of your fears and try some cool things because you never know how you might find it. We got to go to the front of the ship. So every chance I got, I asked to go to the jib net at the very front. You get this whole view of the ship sort of coming at you from the net, and you're leaning out over nothingness. Like there's just water beneath you, beneath this little netting. So that was super, super fun. As the middle picture highlights, we made a pool on deck. We took a sail, we strapped it between the edge and the middle bit, and we filled it with seawater, and we jumped in. It was amazing to have a pool party on board a ship in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was wild. And once we finally got to land, we parked the ship for a little bit. We did some amazing tours, which I'll show you some of the wildlife we saw in a minute. But we got the chance to jump in the Pacific Ocean. So can't pass that up. It's about a 12-foot leap into the water. And while we were swimming there, a sea lion came up about 15 feet away and said hello. So that was super, super cool. Just a really magical time. More cool experiences than I can shake a stick at. Now, as I said, we went out and we were basically out of sight of land for a week. So one night, the captain says, tomorrow morning at 7, we're going to be seeing an island for the first time, San Guyane Island. So I got up at 6:30. I got to the deck. There's only a few other people. And it was like something out of a crazy, like, action adventure movie. It was this, like, calm water. There's, like, mist over the water. And there's this distant island with this epic cloud cap on top of it. It looked like Skull Island. It looked like King Kong could live there. It was amazing. And we get closer and closer and closer. And the view on the left is as we're passing the island. And then when we pass beyond the island, it's this epic desert landscape. It's just the most wild thing I think I've ever seen in nature in my life. And the beach we could see was covered in sea lions, covered in seabirds. Super, super cool. So actually, when we did the broadcast, when I was on board the ship, we were just past this. We just left this. And then we got to another island not long after that actually features in the world's most exciting classroom video. So that was my first sight of land in a week, which was pretty special. Now, what wildlife did we see? Now, when we were out in the water, you don't see much. We did have 2 dolphins one day come and swim off our bow and do like little circles in front, which is something I'd always wanted to see my entire life. We had 2 pilot whales, which are one of the smallest whales. They're about 15, 20 feet long, and they passed just behind our ship. So that was super cool. But mostly we had these little birds that would sort of circle the ship. Sometimes they'd land on the mast. We had petrels, shearwaters, boobies. They were amazing. Just doing circles around the ship and catching fish out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But as we got close to land, we started seeing so much more. So these pelicans are like 5-6 foot wingspan. They get these big groups of 20 and they hover like a foot over the water. And they do this the whole horizon to horizon. It was amazing to see these birds. We had sea lions galore. Between islands, there were all these big pockets of fish that were all around the ship in every direction. And eating them all were like dozens of sea lions that were crazy. They were having so much fun. They're devouring all these fish. They're leaping 3 to 4 feet clear out of the water. We saw dolphins doing the same thing one day. They were a little further off the ship. But it's quite the thing to see hundreds of animals going, like taking 6-foot leaps straight out of the water. It was magnificent. It's something I'd always wanted to see and super, super cool. Birds galore and beautiful birds. The right is the Peruvian booby. So they're a gorgeous bird, 5-foot wingspan, bright white birds. You can't miss them. They look like nothing else when they're flying around the ship. They're really, really elegant when they're flying around. And on the left is the Inca tern, which you should all look up when you're done because this is a distant picture of them. But they've got this bright red bill and bright yellow lips. And they've got this like white curly Q mustache. So they're a really special looking bird. And we saw thousands and thousands and thousands of them. It was wild how many Inca terns we had the chance to see. Saving the best for last, we got to an island just before we landed in Callao in Peru, and our ornithologist, our bird scientist on board said we might see penguins. So we're all really excited about penguins. I'd always wanted to see a penguin in the wild. For most people, it's like the coolest bird they'll ever see. And we're puttering along and we're seeing all the other birds, and suddenly someone screams out, "Penguin!" and loses their mind, and all the other birds in the island take off in the air and start flying around. And this is the penguin. So we take a picture of the penguin, and only later do we realize, if you look at the bottom of the picture, there's an octopus crawling around on land as well. So it's a penguin and an octopus in the same picture. When the tide goes out, the shore is still really wet, and there's all sorts of creatures that sort of huddle and hide on the shore while the tide is out. So the octopus just comes up onto land and hunts them. Like, it's super cool to see. We saw several octopus doing this. They're totally fine as long as they stay wet, but really cool to have that in a picture. And on the right, a flying fish. So I had always wanted to see a flying fish my whole life. They don't actually fly. They don't beat their wings like a bird. What they do is go really, really fast, and they jump out of the water, and they unfurl these fins, and they can go like 300 feet, like 10 times the length of your classroom in one go. They were off the ship all day, every day. Like, there's literally almost never not a moment that you see some flying fish flying somewhere. It's quite incredible how many there are. And in fact, other voyages in history with ships that are lower to the water will just catch them on deck and eat them as part of their journey across the ocean. So they're a really, really special thing to see. So that's like a quick and crazy overview of a little bit of what life was like on board the ship. I absolutely can't wait for your questions on any element of the whole thing. Valparaiso, getting there, Darwin 200 in general, my voyage, what it's like being on a ship. But I'll also encourage all of you, check out Darwin 200 on Instagram. Check out darwin200.com. There is so much more to discover than I could possibly pack into one broadcast. And I really, really appreciate the chance to talk to you all a little bit about it today. Thank you guys so much for your time. And yeah, let's dive in together. Mr. Hughesclass, thank you guys for sticking through that. If you want to flick on your mic, I'll just honestly, I can leave you guys on. YouTubers, feel free to chime in as well. But if there are any questions about what it was like on board the ship, we are good to go.
There we are. We're live again.
We're live. You're back. Hey.
All right. Who's going to kick off a question for Jesse? Johan.
On your trip, did you ever see a giant or squid?
Did I ever see a giant squid? I wish. No. What's the question then?
He asked if you had ever seen a giant or colossal squid on the trip at all.
Oh, I would love to. So they're absurdly rare. And for those who don't know, like, giant and colossal squids are the biggest invertebrates on Earth. They're massive. Like, they can be 40, 50 feet long. Their suckers are like this big with giant hooks on them. Their eye is as big as a dinner plate. So it's the biggest eye in the animal kingdom. They're just insane creatures. Almost no one has ever seen either one of them ever. I think we have 2 videos we've ever captured in the history of man of a giant squid. We've never caught them deep underwater, sort of doing anything, just up by an oil rig. And we only have a few dead bodies of them. So we really know that they're a giant squid, in large part because sperm whales eat them. So these huge monster whales eat the giant squid. They've got big scars of like the giant squid clawing at their skin. And there's something on the giant squid that the whale sort of digests, and we can find that in the whale stomachs. So that's how we know about them. But no, we didn't see them. However, I will say on the squid note, at night, if you go out with a flashlight any night and you just shine it over the water at night, there's thousands of squid jumping everywhere, about this big. And they're everywhere. Like, it's one of the coolest things ever. And I only found out about that in like the second last day. They're like, yeah, have you seen the squid yet? And took me out on deck, and it was amazing. So cool question, man. Thanks.
Cool. All right, Nathan, you want to have a question?
I want to ask like a little question. It's like, isn't it like when those whales and the octopus, like, isn't like the octopus basically trying to defend itself, like it's having like aren't they like basically fighting? Because like the whale's trying to eat it.
Is the octopus trying to fight and defend against the whale from being eaten?
Yes. Like,
yeah. Well, so I mean, like in the wild, the squid would absolutely. And in fact, we know, we just learned this. Like, this is literally science in like the last 2-3 years. We'd always wondered why they had such a big eye. So the second biggest eye in all of nature is a blue whale eye, which is about this big, which is huge. It's ridiculous. The giant squid's eye is like this big. And we were like, why? It makes no sense. The giant squid lives way, way far down. Like, he's in the darkest black depths. No sunlight gets there, like none at all. So it's not like they're picking up like faint traces of light. So we were like, why? So it turns out that the one thing that a super giant eye is good for is the sperm whale goes way down, thousands of feet down, and he comes basically screaming through the water towards this giant squid. And as this monster whale is coming through the water that far down, it's a bioluminescence. So some creatures in the deep glow, like they shine with light when they're disturbed. So if you wave your hand through the water, it'll make the water glow. Our ship did that too. So the whale, as he's going through, kicks up all this light around him, and the giant eye is really good at picking up that light. So basically, it's this crazy adaptation to catch the whale in the quarter second before it eats you with this glowing, streaming trail of light around it to get away. So they do fight. The squid will obviously try and protect its own life. And you have something like a 50, 60-foot whale hunting like a 40, 50-foot squid. So it's actually the biggest battle that's ever happened in the history of the world. Like no dinosaurs compare to that in the ocean. It's insane. So yeah, they absolutely do something.
Most epic battle you could have on Earth is a giant squid and a sperm whale.
It's very cool. It's actually there's an amazing campaign called March Mammal Madness that just wrapped up yesterday that actually talked about some of the battles associated with that. It's a really cool campaign. I can pass it along to you guys when you're done. But yeah, and we would die to film it. Like every scientist in the world would like give their left arm to film that battle happening. It will probably never happen, which is kind of sad, but yeah, cool question, man. I love that we're on the giant squid kick.
Any other questions people have? William?
What is the top speed of the Darwin 200?
Yeah, so not fast at all. And I would have thought way faster. So they sail whenever they can, and they do have an engine. So we had to use the engine for about 4 of the 10 days, but the wind just wasn't strong enough. Joe is on engine right now up the coast of Ecuador. Our sails at the fastest were 11 knots, which is about 21 kilometers an hour. And I think they can get a little bit faster than that. So that sounds super slow, like compared to a car. It's half the speed of your car on like a side street. But when you're on the ship, it feels pretty fast. And it feels really fast when you're in big waves. So the day that we went that fast, the waves were gigantic. It was the first day where I got super insanely seasick. It was like sort of like the ship was going through a washing machine motion. But that's how fast we got, about 21 kilometers an hour. Yeah.
That's about like biking speed, right? Roughly.
Yeah. Or like Usain Bolt running. If you were running it like a flat sprint, you could maybe go 20 kilometers per hour.
Yeah. Awesome. Any other questions people thought of? Steven?
Did anybody get hurt on the ship?
No. And so there's a lot of, basically, they try and make sure that no one does get hurt. And this is true of all expeditions. As you might know from exploring by the seat of your pants, like we bring on Arctic explorers, sea divers, people on ships, like people in these really exotic, amazing places doing really cool stuff. And like the one thing that unifies all those things is that a lot of work is done to make sure that no one gets hurt. Because if we were on that ship and someone got really hurt, like we'd probably call the Navy and see if a helicopter would come rescue someone, but that would take hours, if not days. Like it's not a good situation to get injured. So in the first day, they sort of walk through, here's the ship, here's what you should have precautions for. There's not much that's going to put you in danger as just a regular person walking around. But certainly when we got to like go up the mast or go in the front or do anything that could be dangerous, they put the harness on you, you have the hooks, you're taught how to use those, you're watched by one of the crew members to make sure that you know what you're doing, and you're not going to put yourself in danger or anyone else in danger. And they do a sort of a drill on what happens if someone goes overboard. And so we didn't throw anyone in the water to do that drill, but you are aware of what that's like. Because, of course, that would be the worst possible situation as the ship is going along. A sail ship like that takes a long time to turn around. So if someone goes in the water, they're in quite a bit of trouble, and you try and make sure that that's never going to happen. So I love the question, and we get it all the time. So, yeah, it's
Jesse, I have a question just kind of along the lines of like, not like injury, but the danger element. We had a presenter on Tuesday who he explored and was attempted to cross the Bering Sea, and he considered his expedition a failure because they didn't cross the Bering Sea. But in 2000, his partner actually ended up making it across this. Cool. He was the first one to cross the Bering Strait. Yeah. He talked about an instance where like one of his like fellows that was on the mission, like literally the ice split and he started floating away on this piece of ice from the group. They had to spend 24 hours catching up to him on an inflatable boat, and they eventually rescued the person, and like the person was okay. I was just wondering if there was any like not like injury, but was there any times where you felt like either like afraid or just like overwhelmed by like nature, or like just the fact that like because you're like you said, like you lose sight of the land, you're in like 4 kilometer deep water. Was there any kind of moments for you where you're kind of like, wow, this is like really intense, or like?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the thing that I thought was going to be scary was going up the Mass, and it really wasn't. The only time I was a little sketched out was the very beginning. So, again, we went straight from the harbor, so flat water, out off the coast, and like we instantly hit the biggest waves, not only on the whole trip, but that like I could even conceive of that would be safe. So it was a 4-meter swell. So the water's going up about 13 feet every few seconds, and it was coming in sideways to the ship. So it makes the ship do this and tilt in the water like this, like 30 degrees. So that's like going this way, like every few seconds. And we did that for 30 hours. So two things happened. One is that like I was insanely ill. I've actually never been sicker in my entire life. And now that I'm back home and it's safe and it's good, I'm actually kind of glad that that happened because it allows me to have an experience of what seasickness was like. But at the time, it was truly awful. I was supposed to do a broadcast from the ship on like my second day, and I couldn't. I was just lying on a couch in the lobby for like 24 hours. Yeah, so that was a little sketchy. And I did go outside that day a little bit. So I went out at night, and I mean, that's the thing. As I said, if you go off the ship, that's not a good situation at any time. But at night, they probably wouldn't see you, and you probably wouldn't be able to yell over the power of the waves. So, like, I walk out of the deck, it's pitch black, and the ship's doing this, and I walked along the edge, and I'm like gripping everything to grip, and I was queasy, I was sick. So that was a little. I wouldn't do that again. I would stay inside if it's like that, unless I absolutely had to. But yeah, that's fortunately the only time that I felt sketched out at all. And as you will know from the gentleman on Tuesday, like the Bering Strait is a crazy body of water. I was actually at a fairly like mundane coast. There are some of the journeys on the Darwin 200 voyage that are going to have really heavy seas for a long period of time. They're going to cross in the Antarctic circumpolar current. So the current that's just sort of north of Antarctica, it's one of the most notorious shipwreck areas of the world. This ship has done this several times, so it is going to be safe, but it's a little sketchy. I'm going to put in the chat for you, and I'll share this with you guys in an email later. But when we were on the ship, we watched a documentary of a ship rounding the bottom of South America in 1928. That is one of the most gripping, amazing documentaries I've ever seen, and it shows you what life was like back then when there were no other options for getting goods to other parts of the world. You didn't have that plane to do that. The Panama Canal was still in its infancy, so they had to take these huge ships around the bottom in crazy, insane water with like 160-kilometer winds and 40-foot waves, and that is horrific. I'm glad I wasn't on that expedition. So, yeah, great question.
That sounds awesome. Lauren, do you want to ask a question?
Please.
Have you ever ate a flying fish?
Oh, good. Did you eat flying fish?
No, we didn't. We never caught them on the deck. There were a few squid that ended up on deck, but they were a little decaying, so we didn't eat them. But we did catch a fish called a bonito. So bonito. We caught several of those. And as I said, we did cook those into things. And some of us partook of this, some of us didn't. But when we reached those islands, we passed some octopus fishermen. So some of our guests bought some octopus, and they did put octopus in the food after that. So a few people ate the octopus. I did not eat the octopus, but those are the things that we ate while we were on board. I would have eaten a flying fish if we'd found one and it was intact. I absolutely would have tried that because it would be super cool. Yeah.
All right. Liz, do you want to ask a question?
So many questions. You guys rock.
Have you been to South America before you went?
Yeah, so I've actually been to South America twice before this. I've been really lucky to go up basically the entire West Coast. So Ecuador was my first ever international big trip. I did that when I was Charles Darwin's age, when I was 22. So I got the chance to go into the rainforest there, go up a river, see some amazing wildlife. Very similar to what Joe just did in Peru, actually. So just sort of middle of nowhere in the rainforest, epic adventure. And then I had been to Peru before to see Machu Picchu. So the iconic Inca temple site in the mountains that a lot of you might be familiar with. Machu Picchu is really, really special. Joe just finished seeing that as well when he was down there. So I've seen everything on the west coast of South America now, or at least the 3 big countries that are there. So it was really nice to have the chance to go back and, of course, do something a little more special with this voyage. Thanks.
Any other questions? Johan, do you want to ask another one?
Yeah. You did not see a colossal squid or giant squid, but did you see any type of whales?
Whales. The only whales we saw, I would have listened. About 3 weeks before my leg, they saw a pod of blue whales, which would have been my all-time dream. Like, blue whales are the biggest thing to ever exist on Earth ever. They dwarf the biggest dinosaur, and they saw a whole bunch of them. So that was super cool. I was really hoping for that. The closest thing were these pilot whales. So pilot whales, let me pull up a picture of pilot whales. They're about 15, 20 feet long. They're black. They're a beautiful whale. And so we had two of them together, and they sort of came up beside the ship right alongside some dolphins. So let me pull this up really quick, and you can see what they're like. That's it. I have seen big whales in the past. In fact, where I live in Newfoundland is one of the best places in the world to see whales. We have humpback whales off our coast that jump out of the water and splash. We got fin whales, which is the second biggest whale on earth. I've seen them. Canada's East Coast and West Coast actually are two of the best places in the world to see whales. But these are pilot whales. These are what we saw when we were on the voyage. Thanks for the question, Joanne.
Maybe you'll get lucky next time you're back there. Get a blue whale sighting.
Yes, fingers crossed. There's been so many questions. If you have any more, fantastic. I want to make sure you can go back to class if you need to, but we'll hang out. You have them.
Take a last one.
So like, you know how you're staying with the whales, like, because like you
Take your time.
So like, you sound like a pirate whale. It's like, were they like killer whales, like black or just like black and white?
What are you just asking about killer whales?
Like
Or killer
you know
whales?
how killer whales are like black and white. Like, was it just like completely black or black and white?
They're always black and white, no matter where they are around the world. But I love killer whales. I would have loved to see them. They hunt everything. So they hunt blue whales. They hunt the biggest thing in the world. They hunt great white sharks. Like, there's nothing that they don't go for. They're like the apex predator of the entire world.
So, like,
They're amazing.
What was the other ones that you saw, like, when you went?
They were like grayish color, I think.
Or were they grayish or like blackish grayish or?
What, the whales that we saw?
The whales that you guys saw, yeah.
Yeah, they were blackish grayish. They were more black. Like, they were quite distinctly black. They can be a little gray. The dolphins were all gray. So we had dolphins which they're gray with like a sort of white bottom. That's a common dolphin.
Like
Yeah.
basically black. Like gray.
Yeah.
So it's black.
All right. Any other questions, grade 7s and 8s? Anyone want to finish off with the last one? All right, Jesse. Looks like they're all out of questions.
Perfect, guys. Well, thank you so much. If you have any more questions, again, Mr. Hugh has in my email, so you can pass along any additional queries. I will message you with that documentary, too, if you guys are keen. It's about 35 minutes. It's on YouTube. It's super cool. And, yeah, if you want to follow along, darwin200.com, Instagram, all sorts of stuff there. But thank you so much for joining today.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. Good rest of the day, everybody.
Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye for now.